Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, my Boston Celtics, who I had written off for dead earlier in the season and was disgusted by earlier in the season, are not only the hottest team in basketball, but if you look at a lot of different publications' power rankings, some consider them to be the best team in basketball. 538, Nate Silver's analytics website, which sometimes predicts elections correctly, sometimes not, has the best odds to reach and win the NBA Finals. The team is coming off of a perfect West Coast road trip and a bludgeoning the other night of a very good Utah Jazz team. And not only are the Celtics winning games, they are destroying teams, holding them to under 100 points and oftentimes winning by 20 or more points. So we're going to spend this show talking about how great the Celtics are, which is, my favorite show. My least favorite shows are talking about how great LeBron is and Kyrie Irving. Favorite shows talking about when the Celtics are good. And they are absolutely rolling right now. Sap, this is the best basketball I've seen the Celtics play since one of the Kevin Garnett years. This is the best basketball they've played.
You can make a case this is the best they've played since the 07-08 season, right? I mean, at the start of 08-09, they got off to a great start, and then Garnett got hurt, and they were never quite the same. 2009, 2010, they were a 500 team the second half of the season, but then they turned it on in the playoffs. But, since 2013, when Brad Stevens came here, and then they drafted Marcus Smart the next year, they've had some nice years. They've gone to 3 Eastern Conference Finals. They've never played at this level. The 2018-19 season, when they had all that talent of Tatum and Brown at a very young age, but also Kyrie and Al Horford and Gordon Hayward and Marcus Smart and Marcus Morris and all these players.
Terry Rozier, yeah.
Terry Rozier, that's what we thought they were going to be, a juggernaut, right? Well, this team's a juggernaut right now. They're 21-3 over their last 24 games. The 3 losses have come at home against Detroit right before the All-Star break. You could kind of chalk that up to looking ahead to the All-Star break. And Detroit always plays them tough for whatever reason. They're a physical team. They're well coached. They're not very good, but they battle you. Then they lost a road game in Indiana, which was a surprise, got blown out. And then they lost to Dallas on Kevin Garnett Day by 3 points. That's it. So this is a team that's just beating every team that they put in front of them. A lot of them really good teams. You beat Denver and Golden State on the road handily.
By a lot, yeah.
By a lot. It's not even close. I mean, it's like halftime and you're like, okay, that game's over. I'm watching the Utah game the other night. It's halftime. I'm like, this is over. There's no chance they're going to lose this game. And Utah's a damn good team, and you beat them by 28. So they're doing it on both ends. Defensively, we know that they can be elite, and they are elite. You've got a starting 5 where you have plus defenders, right? Marcus Smart, Rob Williams III, both outstanding defenders.
Yeah, I think you could make a case that they have the best perimeter defender and the best post defender. I'm not saying they do, but I'm saying you could make a case.
They're in that discussion, right? So I think both of those guys will be either first or second team All-NBA defensively.
Yes.
Horford's always been a good defensive player. He knows what he's doing. He's a versatile guy. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, I think they've embraced being good defensive players. And now the ability to switch, especially with Rob Williams, and their ability to close on shooters is scary. They're third best in the NBA in terms of defending the 3, and that's huge in that league, right? Because it's so prominent in terms of 3-point shooting, and they're really good at defending it. So the defensive end has been great. Where I've been most impressed has been on the offensive end, because it looked like a selfish team for the first half of the year. It was a lot of ISO ball. You get down to the end of a game, and it was Jason Tatum and ISO or Jaylen Brown, and they'd chuck up a shot, and the other 4 guys on the court would just throw their hands up and say, I'm out here too. Well, that's not happening anymore. The ball movement has been incredible. In that win over Utah the other night, 37 assists on 50 made baskets. That's 74% of your made baskets with assists. That's outstanding. The ball movement is great. They're playing with a lot of force. They're forcing the tempo. They're not settling for good shots. They're looking to get great shots. And offensively, they've been elite, thus a 21-3 record over the last 2 months.
Yeah, they're 46 and 28 as of this podcast, Sap. So they're likely going to win 50 plus games, which
right.
I didn't think they were going to sniff 40 games at some point in the season. At the halfway mark of the season, I thought that that was laughable to think that they'd be I thought they might be a 500 team. I thought that was their best case scenario. They
were a 500 team all of last year.
Right.
They were a 500 team for the first 2.5 months, 3 months this year. So you'd be led to believe they were a 500 team, right?
It's the single greatest in-season turnaround for a basketball team that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
In season.
I mean, from what we're watching, I remember, I'm old. I think the Seattle Supersonics, and this is really going in the weeds here, but the Supersonics in 77, 78 were 5-17 to start the season. They fired the coach and they ended up going to the NBA finals like that. But that was early in the season. This was like mid-season. You're like, well, the Celtics, if they're lucky, they'll get in the play-in tournament and probably get bounced in that. And even if they get lucky to win that, they'll get bounced in the first round. And now it's like Nate Silver has them winning the NBA championship. And he's been on this for about a month. And a month ago, I think, is this guy a little bit crazy? We know he's kind of botched some presidential elections. But now I look at it, and I tweeted out during that Utah Jazz game the other night, as of 8:04 on whatever the date was, the Boston Celtics are the best team in basketball right now. And I truly believe that. I'm not a green teamer. You are. I wear purple and gold sunglasses, and those aren't really good right now. But the Celtics, as we speak, I think, are the best team in basketball because they do it on both ends of the floor.
That's what it is. That's what it is, Sap. It's the offense, which was not good earlier in the year because it was just a lot of iso ball has become beautiful to watch. Like you said, the ball movement has been fantastic. It's really been beautiful to watch. A lot of that credit goes to Jason Tatum becoming more of an active facilitator, and to Marcus Smart, who, when he returned from injury, just became a great point guard all of a sudden. It's like something switched where he's like, oh, I'm not going to take really bad shots all the time. I'm going to use my high basketball IQ and use it in a basketball game instead of just to, play good defense. It's like, I can use this on offense too. And he's been a great point guard for them for 2 months now, Sap.
That's your guy. And I've always criticized him. I'm not generally giving him a lot of praise. I think he's the biggest reason for this turnaround. Now, in early January, he missed 6 games with injury. He returned in January. In the 26 games since returning from injury on January 23rd, Smart is averaging 6.3 assists per game and only 9 field goals attempt per game. So he's not shooting as much as he was. He's now a true point guard.
And he's not turning it over.
And he's not turning it over. So in those 26 games, the Celtics are 22-4. Now, here's an interesting stat. Smart's played 63 games this year. In those games, the Celtics are 42-21. He's missed 11 games this year. In those games, the Celtics are 4-7. He means a lot to that team. It's like a switch went off, and he's.
Did he go to like a retreat when he was injured? Did he get hypnotized? Like,
I don't know.
Something clicked.
Could it be that the trade deadline was approaching, and they said, Marcus, this is what we need you to do. You're a great defender, great passer. We don't need you chucking up threes. Here's your role. Accept it. I'm going to go in the way back machine again, showing my age here. He's playing the point guard position a lot the way Mo Cheeks played it for Philadelphia. Mo Cheeks is in the Hall of Fame, and I think Mo Cheeks was a player you loved. Mo Cheeks was a great defensive player, superb passer, could get you 10, 11, 12 points per game if needed. He could get you more if needed, but he wasn't predominantly a scorer. But he had Andrew Toney and Dr. J and Moses Malone and all sorts of players. Later on, Charles Barkley. I think finally it's gotten through to Marcus Smart that, hey, I've got Jason Tatum, who's one of the best scorers in the league. I've got Jaylen Brown, who's an elite player. We've got other guys that can do these things. Here's the things I do well, and that's going to impact winning because that's what he's done, and that's why this team is winning. I think he's the biggest reason. Also, Jet, he's the biggest personality on the team, right? I think we can kind of...
And he's the longest tenured Celtic.
Jason Tatum is very, very chill. Jaylen Brown is kind of a quiet, intense guy. Marcus Smart's outwardly the most charismatic or has the biggest personality on the team. He's not afraid to show that. So even if he's the third or fourth best player on the team, I think Rob Williams is vaulted to become the third best player on the team, but whatever. His personality has a way of coming through, and you could see that he's kind of led Rob Williams to becoming a better player. But that personality's come through for Marcus Smart, and he's playing the point guard position the way Mo Cheeks played it for Philadelphia, and that's exactly what the Celtics needed.
Yeah, I think what he had to figure out was when he's on the court, there's going to be, at least if he's on the court with the starters, there's going to be at least 3 other guys who are better options for a 3-point shot than him. Tatum, Brown, Horford. So if Grant Williams is on the court with him too, then there's 4 other players who are better 3-point option than him.
And even Peyton Pritchard, right? I mean, Peyton Pritchard,
it's become, and we could talk about him in a second because he's really like flipped the switch too. So I think it was like maybe stepping away from the team. Maybe the thing, like you said about the trade deadline, gave him more perspective on what he could do to help the team the most. And, offensively, defensively, I don't think there's ever been any question about how good he is. And what he does for the team. And he's a full he's never half-assed a game. I haven't seen him do that any game in his career. But I think, you make a great point that, his turnaround in play has been perhaps the most impactful. Now, obviously, Jason Tatum's the best player in the team. That's been settled for a while now. He's elevated his game to a tremendous level, not just scoring the ball, but rebounding, defending, becoming more of a facilitator. He's gotten better at every single aspect of his game. Literally every single aspect of his game he's improved on this season. Another guy, Sap, we mentioned is Rob Williams has taken a leap. And here's what Rob Williams does that's so effective for the Celtics defensively. They basically, like you said, they switch everything and they try to funnel things into him because he's so athletic. He covers so much space that basically once the team gets inside the perimeter, they're terrified to shoot because he blocks everything. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like, okay, we're going to switch. If he beats us, we're going to make sure he beats us funneling towards Rob Williams. And then they have to kick out and or try to challenge Rob Williams. It's I don't know how long he can do this for, because obviously at some point your athleticism wanes. We saw that with DeAndre Jordan, who I think is a good comp for Rob Williams. Yep. But the years, the 4 years of elite athleticism that Rob Williams has last 4 or 5 years, they can just keep doing this sort of defense where he covers so much range, Sap. That's what's unique about him, is he covers a gigantic amount of space because he's so long and athletic.
Yeah, and again, he's got a very high basketball IQ. He's a sneaky good passer.
Very good passer for his position, yeah.
Great court awareness. So you're right. So now you also have your two bigs are really good passers. Of the starting 5, the only guy that I'm not crazy about as a passer is Jaylen Brown. He's not a plus passer, but they don't need him to be. That's fine. Let him drive to the basket. He's damn good at that, and he's a good defender. I mean, I love Jaylen Brown, but passing is not exactly his best skill. But now your two bigs can pass, and the lobs to Rob Williams, they're just awe-inspiring. Like there's, I could probably...
Marcus Smart might be the best lob passer in the NBA. Oh. Chris Paul is, but then Marcus Smart seriously might be. He's perfect at those.
It's Aaron Rodgers to Devontae Adams. Who
well, not anymore.
Play again, yeah. I want to see Devontae Adams the next time, or the first time he gets wide open in Vegas and Derek Carr sends one over his head.
Well, he played with him in college. He knows Derek Carr.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, just the money was good, and who the hell wouldn't want to live in Vegas over Green Bay, right? You're in shorts and t-shirt year round, not wearing a heavy coat in September. But Marcus Smart's a great lobber. And again, Marcus Smart's a sensational passer. The defense playing that position perfectly. Rob Williams with that defensive versatility, really. I mean, and again, when they're constantly switching, funnel it into Rob Williams, like you said, Jet. But then what they are able to do is close on shooters because they're so damn long. I mean, Tatum, Brown,
They're
Horford,
very long. Yes, that's a great point,
Marcus
Seth.
Smart long. I mean, Marcus Smart's 6'4", but he's long. I mean, Rob Williams feels like he covers half the court. So they're long. And then what's also helped is, I think, now defined roles. And then you look at the bench, and I'm still not crazy about the bench, but it's held up. You know, you get Grant Williams, who can defend and can shoot corner threes. Derek White's a nice player, does a lot of similar things to Marcus Smart. He struggled shooting, but he's a nice addition. Pritchard's become a really good three-point shooter, and that's going to be important in the fourth quarter because they're going to try to take the ball out of Jason Tatum's hands. We saw that in the Dallas game. So it's important for Peyton Pritchard. And then Daniel Tice is a guy who's going to go out there, play 12, 14 minutes, is going to use up some fouls and, you know, try to do the best he can.
And
so
spell Horford. Really, that's what his biggest role is so Horford doesn't have to play an absurd amount of minutes.
Yeah, because you can be versatile with Grant Williams. You know, you can use him as a big. And then because you want to limit Horford and Rob Williams to around 30 minutes.
Right.
So now you've got other minutes to fill there, and Grant Williams can give you that. I mean, heck, you've got a lot of versatility on the team, and Ime Udoka has done a great job. And I liked him from the get-go because
I think Sap, I want to talk about him. I'm glad you mentioned him.
I pushed back when people were. I said, first of all, it's his first time as a head coach, so let's give him a little chance here. I think he's got a really. He cuts an authoritative figure, and I love when there's a timeout and he comes out to the court and he'll pick one or two players and he coaches them right up, right? Like even in the Utah game, in the second quarter, we saw Jaylen Brown take some ill-advised threes. I mean, they were up by 1 million, so it wasn't, a big concern. Right. But Jaylen Brown has a tendency of just getting a little bit ahead of himself, and you can see Ime Udoka just wasn't yelling at him. He wasn't screaming. He handled himself as if to say, Jaylen, we've got a big lead. Let's relax a little bit. And he coaches that way. The man can obviously coach defense. That's his forte. And again, he's from the Popovich tree, and that tree is very fruitful in the NBA. So I think he's done a fantastic job because it didn't look easy early in the season, and yet he's righted the ship.
Yeah, listen, I criticized him a lot early in the season, and if I'm going to criticize him then, I have to compliment him now. It's only fair and only reasonable. I think he's turned it around and done a great job and deserves a lot of credit. I think what I didn't account for when I was criticizing him earlier in the season was that he was tearing down basically the system that Brad Stevens had in place and installing a completely new system, especially defensively. And I thought that should be an easy adoption because it's not like football where it's a whole new playbook, but I don't think I accounted for how hard it is to on the fly learn something new. And I think also he had some early growing pains and didn't necessarily know how to install the system and communicate the best way and figured it out along the way. That's where I think maybe it would have been expedited had they had a former coach on the staff, which I thought was a mistake, but he's clearly found something that has clicked with this team in terms of what works for them defensively, how to get them to move the ball. I think they listen to him. I think they respect him. I think they like him. And I think he deserves a lot of credit. I also, what's interesting about him is I agree with you. He has like sort of like an authoritarian tone to him, which I think the Celtics desperately needed because Brad Stevens just let everything go. But I think he keeps a lot of it in-house. And when you see his press conference and stuff, he's very quiet and reserved. He's not giving you any sort of interesting quotes. He's not buddy-buddy with the media, which I think is good. And, everybody loved Brad Stevens and, he was great for a quote and stuff like that. And I think Udoka strikes me more as like the Belichick thing, probably because he learned from Popovich, where he's like, okay, let's just get this press conference over with. I want to go to my actual job, which is, coaching the team. And, maybe he'll joke around with the team and stuff behind closed doors, which I think creates more of a sense of camaraderie and community. And I think he relates obviously better to the players as a former player, as a Black man. I think he relates better to the players too. And I think he deserves a ton of credit. And I criticized him early in the season. And I think a lot of the reasons, like I said, is that I wasn't accounting for the difficulty of the first time in his life trying to install a new system from scratch to players who weren't used to that and have played their whole careers playing a completely different style of basketball. And I think it took time, and you're seeing the fruits of that effort right now.
That's a great point, Jet. And also in the NBA, you have training camp that kind of whisks on through that. And then when the season starts, there aren't a lot of practices. There's this travel, there's condensed schedules. It's not an opportunity where you get, that's one thing that Brad Stevens always talked about, because in college, you can have those practices, the schedules spread out more. You may have 3 straight games at home with 6 days off kind of sprinkled in, so you can have those practices. You can't do that in the NBA. I mean, I know the Celtics right now are fortunate because, they played on a Wednesday night against Utah, and they don't play again until Sunday night against Minnesota, and both those games at home. So there's a little stretch there to rest, rehab, but maybe also get a practice or 2 in to try to fine tune some things. Also, when you look at what Brad Stevens has done, I think getting Al Horford back for Kemba Walker was a perfect move. And also, although Brad Stevens did sign Dennis Schroeder, getting rid of him was addition by subtraction. I just think Dennis Schroeder's an asshole. And I just think he's a guy who doesn't really fit in with the team. And I also don't think it's a coincidence that the team has played better since he's been gone.
No, that's not a coincidence. Because he's playing a lot of ISO ball, a lot of it.
Yeah, he walked into the Lakers last year and said, "No, I'm the point guard." This is the year after LeBron had won the title and led the league in assists. I was like, okay, I guess you're better than LeBron then. So I did just a guy who's just good enough that he's going to always stay in the league, but just get traded every year because people get sick of him. Like Rondo has that, reputation as well, but Rondo's at a different level as a player, right? Just a guy.
He's won a couple of titles.
Right. And he's, he's a genius level player, in my opinion. But Schroeder's a guy who I think that just after a while, people are like, just get out of here.
Yeah. And I think that move. I agree with you. It was probably addition by subtraction. And also what it did was, Peyton Pritchard was buried on this team. Yes, I don't think Udoka trusted him. And so Pritchard is, and I know him very well from college, his game. I don't know him personally. His game, I think, relies a lot on confidence and how confident he's feeling. And I think you saw in the sporadic minutes he got, and he was then seated behind on the depth chart, Schroeder and Smart and all those guys, and was barely playing. He was playing poorly when he got in because I think he had no confidence. And now that Schroeder is gone, even though they brought in another point guard in White, it's still increased his minutes. And with the more minutes he's played and the more time he's played with starters and stuff like that, he's gotten more confidence. Since the turn of the calendar, I believe he's shooting nearly 50% from 3, nearly 50% or better from the floor, and 100% from the free throw line.
That's crazy.
So I mean, he's played tremendous for them. He's also hit some big threes in the fourth quarters, and I think it all has to do with confidence. It's not even the repetition. It's just that, okay, I think the coach believes in me now. I takes the load off my back. Brian Scalabrine, who I don't think is a great analyst, I think he's okay, and sometimes he puts in a gem. And I think he made a great point the other night when he was talking about Pritchard, Sapp. And I want to see what you think about this. He said, there's a huge difference from knowing you've arrived in the NBA to knowing you've belonged in the NBA. And I think that's what we saw with Pritchard. I thought it was a great point from the Scal, is that, okay, Pritchard had a good rookie year for sure, especially considering he was a late first round pick. But I think that knowing you belong in the NBA takes some time, and you're constantly worried, this is my dream. Am I blowing it? Until you feel like you belong.
That's a great quote. Absolutely. I think Scal nailed it. And again, Pritchard is a shooter. Shooters have to shoot, and they have to have some sort of consistent minutes. They can't just play 12 minutes one night and then not play the next night, and then play 12 minutes and then sit another game. They need some sort of consistent minutes. And it also helps that Pritchard plays most of his time on the court with Jason Tatum. And I think they have a nice chemistry together. So Tatum, who again at the end of games, if you're a smart defensive coach, and I think Jason Kidd did this against the Celtics in the Dallas game a couple of weeks ago, he ran double teams at him. He basically said, "You're not beating us. Let someone else beat us." And Pritchard had an off night shooting, and they weren't able to win. But for the most part, he's been nailing his 3-pointers, as you said, 50% since January 1st. That's pretty amazing. But he's going to get those shots with Jason Tatum on the floor. So again, another really good point there about Ime Udoka as a coach saying, okay, my best player, if they're going to take the ball out of his hands and force him to, have to pass the ball, let me make sure that I have some spot up shooters, and Pritchard's that guy. So I think everybody's kind of felt and feel their roles now, and they're comfortable with that. And that's really what you need to have a successful team, is the guys knowing, rotations, what they're going to do out there, what they're needed to do, what their roles are, and then they can fit those roles. It's just been a startling turnaround. I mean, they're just dominating teams. It's almost laughable. I mean, it's like good teams too. I mean, Utah, Denver, and Golden State are damn good.
Yeah, and they crushed all of them. Crushed them.
They crushed all of them, and then they beat Brooklyn with Durant and Kyrie. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, they're just wiping people out.
Well, Sap, okay, in December, they took their first West Coast road trip. They take 2 a year. They went 1-4 on it, losing to the terrible Lakers and to some other dregs. And then this road trip, 4-0.
The Lakers weren't that bad in December. Actually, the Lakers had a better record than the Celtics, I think, going into January, believe it or not.
They don't anymore.
But we got the league's leading scorer.
That's true. They do. But if you listen to Skip Bayless, he ducked the Philadelphia game because he was worried about his scoring average because Embiid at the rim. Maybe, I don't know. But so last point about the Celtics, Sap, before we wrap up here. Right now, they're the 4 seed. They're in a virtual tie for second place with Philadelphia and Milwaukee. They are only a game and a half out of the 1 seed, Miami. So they could finish anywhere from 1 to 4.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying they're playing the best basketball in the NBA. I agree with you. Right now, I think it's by a wide margin. They're playing the best basketball in the NBA. That doesn't make them the best team. It just means they're playing the best basketball right now. So the playoffs, obviously, there's 8 teams that from each conference that make it. Who are the Celtics' preferred opponents? Who don't they want to play, Sap?
I think in the first round, obviously, it would be Chicago or Cleveland. And if they're the 3 or 4 seed, they'll play one of those teams, because I think that Chicago's probably locked in at number 5 and Cleveland's locked in at number 6. So that's why you want the Celtics to be the 3 or 4 seed. I think they would wipe either of those teams out, maybe a gentleman's sweep. Obviously, Brooklyn is an issue, especially now that Kyrie can play all the games. We don't know if Ben Simmons is going to be participating in the playoffs. And also Milwaukee, because Giannis is just a nightmare matchup. As great as the Celtics defense is, who's covering him? Be some interesting matchups at the rim.
And their defense is tremendous. Milwaukee's
tremendous, yeah. And they're the defending champs, so they've got that confidence going with that. And they started heating up from 3-point territory, and Giannis is a guy who's very comfortable in letting his teammates also take big shots. So I would say Brooklyn, because of the 2 great players, and also Milwaukee would be the toughest opponents. Chicago and Cleveland, the easiest opponents. Philadelphia, when Harden got there and the first 5 games went well, I'm like, boy, this team looks really good. But then I'm always in the back of my mind thinking Harden's plays down in the playoffs, and Embiid, because he's such a big man, doesn't have much left once the playoff comes. And then now we've got Miami, where Jimmy Butler's challenging his head coach Eric Spoelstra to a fight, and maybe Butler's a guy who lasts 2.5 years at a location, and then
also a bit of an a-hole, like you said with Dennis Schroeder. He's a much better player, but he's definitely an a-hole.
Another guy who just after about 3 years, it's like, okay, it's time to move on. And that culture is so strong, and Spoelstra and Pat Riley, that they'll do that. They'll, at the end of the season, they'll decide to move on from Jimmy Butler. They're not going to get rid of the coach because he's arguably the best coach in the sport, and they're all about culture. But I would say you want to play Cleveland or Chicago in the first round. I think that would be a pretty easy series. You don't want to play Milwaukee. You won't play Milwaukee in the first round because both the Celtics and Milwaukee will be among the top 4 seeds. So you won't see them till second or third round. Brooklyn's the team that every team is looking at saying, let's hope we don't play them.
Yeah, especially in the first round, because you don't want to be, if you're a top seed, you don't want to be challenged much in the first round. So yeah, the teams that are at the top, so Miami, Philly, Milwaukee, Boston, they're going to be 1 through 4 in some order. It's basically settled at this point. Chicago has not been playing well recently, but they're probably going to be the 5 seed. But they could end up as the 6 seed because they have not been playing well recently. And then of the teams that are in the play-in right now, Sap, and these are going to be the teams that are going to be in the play-in: Toronto, Brooklyn, Charlotte, Atlanta. We're assuming Brooklyn is going to get out of that and make the playoffs. Who's the other team that makes the playoffs?
I always pull for Charlotte. I look at their talent, and they should be better than they are, right? You've got LaMelo Ball. You got Terry Rozier playing well. You got Bridges. What's the story with? Oh yeah, Isaiah Thomas, absolutely. What's up with Gordon Hayward? He's in and out of the lineup. I mean, you would think that they could make it into the tournament, into the playoffs, get through that play-in tournament. So I would think that I would say Charlotte maybe. Again, I'm thinking that Brooklyn beats Toronto, becomes the 7 seed, and then Charlotte beats Atlanta, although that's not exactly an easy game, and then Charlotte beats Toronto to get the 8 seed. But again, these other teams like Washington are kind of sitting there trying to get in as well. I don't think, other than Brooklyn, I don't see any of those teams really going far because they certainly have their flaws.
Yeah. So for the Celtics, I agree. I think their ideal bracket for them is play Chicago or Cleveland in the first round, play Miami or Philadelphia in the second round, and then play Brooklyn or Milwaukee in the conference finals. That's their best case scenario.
You hope that, let's say, Philly plays Brooklyn in the first round and they go 7 games and beat the hell out of each other, and then you go on from there. The only thing you could look at, I don't know, is, maybe if you play Brooklyn in the first round, that's the best time to get them. Although I think the more it lingers, the better chance you have, because Kyrie's never really, other than a couple of years in Cleveland, never really finished the playoffs.
Right.
He's getting hurt, and Durant isn't exactly, Cal Ripken either. So, if things linger on and it gets to the conference finals, then although Brooklyn then would have a lot of confidence winning 2 series, there'd also be that much more wear and tear on those 2 players who just aren't durable. They're just not.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, that's a fair point too.
Right, they are. I mean, it's not like LeBron who gets to the finals and still has a lot left.
Not this year.
Not this year. He's got to win the scoring title though. Which let me just say this about my man. So he won the scoring title in 2007, 2008. So if he wins it this year, it'd be 14 years between his first and his second scoring title, which is pretty amazing. I hadn't realized this. He's finished top 3 in scoring, including this year, 11 times.
That's good.
Oh, okay. I thought that would be more impressive.
Yeah, but, good for him.
Good.
He's a pretty good player.
He's pretty good. Yeah, Skip Bayless has him as the 9th greatest player ever. I'm like, wow. I want to find out who those 8 guys above him are. They must be
pretty good. Yeah, man,
yeah.
I'd say he's a fine player.
Yeah, he's a nice.
Last question, Sap, and this is, I mean it, and this is really the only question.
Yes.
Can the Celtics win the championship?
Yes. I really believe that. And again, I'm not a green teamer. So I'm coming at this from, being honest, analytical, because how many teams are elite on both ends of the floor? And here's the only thing that's weird. And I don't know how much this means if it means anything. This year, the Celtics are 4-14 in games decided by 5 or fewer points. That's like putrid.
Yeah, that's really bad.
Now, in 1997, I'm sure a lot of the playoff games were decided by 5 or fewer points. It seems like now even the playoff games are blowouts because one team gets up by 17, the other team keeps taking threes, doesn't hit them, and the final score is 120-95. So again, the Celtics, only 25% of their games have been decided by 5 or fewer points. Imagine if they were just even a 500 team in those games, they'd be the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference.
It'd be a 60-win team.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange stat, isn't it? And again, I think what happens is at the end of those close games, they get into the bad habit of playing too much ISO ball. They even did that against Dallas.
They did.
Really only close game that I can remember in the last month. And it was close, and they started to get into ISO ball rather than keeping the ball moving, which is what's been their calling card so far. So, but I think they certainly can. Absolutely. But, you run into the wrong team in the first round, you could also get bounced. I mean, if you're the 2 seed and you're playing Brooklyn, it would be a shock if Brooklyn beat them in the first round. Imagine Brooklyn Celtics in the first round. That feels like a conference final. The East, I don't ever remember the East being this deep. To the point where Brooklyn could be the 7 seed, and say Toronto, which we know is a well-coached, solid team, being the 8 seed. There's no layups in the East this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I'm very happy to see that you're so in on the Celtics, Sep. That's great news.
I am. Yes, and since I never pick anything right, I picked Kentucky to win the national championship. So maybe that's bad news, Jed.
Well, you're not picking them; you're saying they can.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the team goes 21-3 over a 2-month stretch, and just it almost feels like they have a collegiate feel to it. That's the other weird thing is this looked like a team early in the season that hated each other. It looked miserable on the bench, and then now it's
and I think the fans have really embraced this team now too, because they're playing well, and that's what happens at Boston. If the fans will embrace a team that's playing hard and playing well, and so the Garden's become raucous recently,
and that gives them a solid home court advantage, which is nice to have. I mean, a timeout's called and guys are flying off the bench, and Marcus Smart's talking to everybody, and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum look like they're in love, and it's weird. It's just 3 months ago, I was like, do these guys even like each other? I don't know.
No, that's how I felt. I was miserable 3 months ago, and now I'm happy.
Yeah, there you go. See, just takes a long winning streak, and everything's okay.
Right. You could be happy too, Sap, if you decide to, have have the Lakers completely change their roster.
Yeah, that's going to be difficult with a point guard who makes $47 million and can't
He's
shoot.
been playing better recently.
They have actually been playing better. I mean, in the back of my mind, Anthony Davis comes back and is healthy. They might scare someone, but if they're going to play Phoenix in the first round, I don't think they'd get very far.
We will have to see, but that is going to do it for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are, as always, presented by our friends at Full Press Coverage. So thanks to them, and thanks to all you for listening. If you want to find the show, just type in Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap on anywhere that podcasts are found. And you can check out our social medias for information about the show, different sports takes, polls, all that good stuff. I know Sap probably has a lot to say about the Green Bay Packers too, as their team is slowly disintegrating. It's the tough while for Sap right now. But I'm going out Sap 25,
be their go-to receiver next year.
You might have to be.
They're going with 59-year-old John Sapichetti.
They may have to. So at John Sap 25 and at Jet Stryer, and we'll be back next week with a new pod. So make sure you stay on the lookout for that, everybody, and we'll talk to you later. See ya.